So I was on a fantasy Larp, a live action roleplay on last weekend, and I'm still a bit exhausted from the whole experience. Anyway, I thought this was a good opportunity to talk a bit about live action roleplay and the kind of experiences you only have in a live situation and the differences, the advantages and disadvantages there might be to tabletop RPG. So, one thing that live action roleplay does very well is to give you the very mundane experience of living in the outdoors. It's very similar to just regular camping or maybe a bit wilderness survival, outdoorsmanship, if you will. So, the mundane reality of being cold, of being wet, and you will appreciate dry clothes, and especially dry, warm clothes. Suddenly, a blanket or a rainproof cloak become a much more precious and practical item than a priceless sword. And you will appreciate that it is not trivial, not at all, to light a good bonfire, to light it fast without using too much kindling, and then have a fire burning that is not filling everything with smoke, but get a good clean fire burning. And then cooking on that fire without burning everything. Or laying next to the fire and watching the stars above and the sparks from the fire fly up. Or the sudden rush to secure everything and clean up and get everything into the tent, into a dry space when suddenly a thunderstorm blows over and threatens to wash away your camp. Or how cold and wet it gets in the early hours of the morning just before dawn, when water droplets condensate on every surface. Of course, you also get more adventurer-focused experiences, like what it is like to wear actual heavy armor all day long. Only then can you truly appreciate that armor class is not everything. You can't always wear the best and heaviest type of armor. It's just not practical. Usually, you will only wear the lightest amount of armor you can get away with for whatever activity you are doing right now. So if you're just traveling and there might be danger, but you're not going into like a battle, then some padded armor and a helmet is good enough. And only when you expect to get into a fight, when you expect to go into a battle, only then will you put on your full set of armor, your chainmail, your plate, and go into that battle. And hopefully it won't last too long, because it's bloody exhausting to fight in full armor. That said, if you are portraying a professional fighter, knight, or mercenary, you should try to wear your armor as much as possible to get accustomed to the feel and weight. So I will put on my chainmail in the morning and take it off in the evening, and only then do you appreciate simpler types of armor that allow you quite mundane things again, like putting them on by yourself without needing someone to help you and strap buckles under your arm you can't reach, or taking it off yourself, taking it off quickly. And of course, how amazingly light and light-feeted you feel once you've taken that armor off and take a few steps. You will appreciate an armor that allows you to still move around freely, like well-fitting plate, chainmail or only padded armor. Armor that allows you to just sit down sometimes, or armor which allows you to easily go to the toilet and do your business. And in those circumstances, you will realize that you can't wear heavy plate armor all of the time. You want something lighter for everyday use and only armor up for battle, for tourneys. So medium armor becomes much more important. Light armor becomes much more important if you take putting it on, off, and living with it into account. When you go into the woods at night with only an oil lantern for light, you will appreciate that distances and perception is very subjective indeed. When with the cone of your light you can see like 5 meters, 10 meters tops, and everything else just vanishes in darkness and twilight. And if then you're hearing monsters or brigands or something just outside of your vision, and you can't pinpoint exactly where they are, how many they are, your heart rate will certainly go up. You will also appreciate how bloody dangerous it is to fight in a forest. In a, let's say, normal forest where not every branch is picked off and every underbrush is cleared away, but a forest where fallen wood stays on the ground, where thorn bushes and other type of undergrowth grow wild. It's very treacherous footing. It slows you down, it makes some parts completely impassable, and if you're fighting in these parts, the footing becomes very treacherous. It's very easy to trip, to fall onto something dangerous, possibly injure yourself. It's very easy to sprain an ankle or something. And also use this as a tactic, of course. Lure your enemy into bad footing, maybe some patches of thorn bushes that are just knee high. And once he's stuck in there, you pepper him with arrows or with spears from the outside and laugh your ass off. It's also bloody dangerous to fight in the dark. The factor of randomness just increases manifold when everyone is just swinging away in the darkness. You will hit people in locations you didn't anticipate. You will be hit from blows you didn't even see coming. Good armor becomes much more important, and technique becomes almost irrelevant. It's a really chaotic situation. So in Fantasy Larp, we try to avoid fighting where there's bad footing or bad lighting whenever possible because of safety reasons. And that is something you should keep in mind when you're designing encounters. The element of terrain, the element of vision that comes into play and can be used for tactics. Combat, and especially mass combat, can be really disorienting, and it is bloody hard to keep track of everything that is going on, of all the troop movements, of the losses inflicted and suffered, of the terrain lost and gains, of the formations broken and reformed. It's also very important to keep track of all that. I can't count the number of times I've been fighting with 1 or 2 guys in front of me and been winning, and then I get stabbed from behind or overwhelmed by 5 enemies at once because I was 5 steps ahead of my own formation. That drawn back or I have charged too far ahead, and then I'm suddenly alone and surrounded. You always have to keep your head on a swivel and not only fight the guy in front of you, but the guys next to him as well. And it's situations like this when you really appreciate having a competent fighter you can trust safeguarding your back. Just last weekend, me and one of my comrades, we were going back to camp from the woods, and darkness had just fallen. It was still like twilight, and just the two of us, narrow forest paths, and then about 4 to 6, lost count really, brigands showed up to our right on the high ground among the trees and started surrounding us, and we started pushing hard along the track, trying to crush through anyone who get into our way and then disengage and withdraw. But it didn't really work out. We couldn't push through, so we found ourselves surrounded on all sides, fighting against twice or thrice our number. I was fighting a guy with like an axe and a shield, and I was drawing back, and suddenly I felt something in my back, but it was my comrade's back. He was still standing. My back was safe, his back was safe, and eventually we fought our way through all of these brigands. That was bloody cool. But at that time we were just glad to be able to make it back to camp alive at all. It was only like 2 days later when I realized that that was an actual very badass scene. Larp is an amazing experience to kinda get out of yourself and become good at just talking to people or leading people or flirting. Because while it is still a real situation, it's not completely real. These are real people you're talking to, but you're like in character. And failure is not really that bad. You can just try again another time. It's still a game. It's very easier to overcome your inhibition and talk in front of a huge crowd or try to bluff your way past some guards. It's a good opportunity to get out of your own self for a few hours, maybe a few days, and try out something else. Try out to be a blacksmith, cook, mercenary leader, thief, wise mage, whatever. And live action roleplay is much more immersive and also longer form than tabletop RPG in that regard. For just a few hours, for maybe a few days, you're not worrying about your own problems anymore. You're worrying about your character's problems. So when you come back after that and have to deal with real life again, you're refreshed. Well, it's not like you've been relaxing all weekend. It's a different form of stress. It's more of the good kind of stress. What doesn't work really well in LARP is playing a character that is completely against your type. You're somehow always limited by your own body type and your own ability. While theoretically you could play anything, if you can't portray it in a way that the other players will accept what you are playing and interact with your character, then it's not really feasible. For example, I can play anything that requires a tall blonde guy or a tall strong guy. I can play amazing Vikings. I can play orcs, maybe ogres, maybe even trolls. But I can't play elves or dwarves or women to any point where it wouldn't just be comically. That is something that tabletop RPG is better at. You can play roles that are much further removed from yourself than you could ever do at a LARP. Also, tabletop RPG usually has a better plot, because you only have a small number of players, like 5, and the GM makes a plot for these 5 characters, while at a usual LARP you have anywhere between, let's say, 30 to 3,000 players. So the plot is not really made for your character, and you have to work as a group to solve the plot, or make your own plot if you want something personal. So yeah, that is everything I have to tell you about LARP at the moment. If you're interested, I've got a second channel where I have crafting how-to videos for making LARP equipment like weapons, armor and clothing. And if you like videos like this, consider liking down below and subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.